Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 22nd day of May 2023. Several issues that are supposed to be happening today and the week. We also know that there's expected to be that National Delegates Conference of the Jubilee Party. Of course, there has been a lot of squabbles within that party. There is the faction of Kanini Kega and Sabina Chege that have been saying that that meeting is inconsequential. But the side of former President Uhuru Kenyatta says that they will go on with the meeting at the Ngong Racecourse as soon as it begins. We'll be sure to bring you the latest from that side. But also this morning we're looking at the papers and of course the many stories that are defining the tenure of President William Ruto, now 8 months and almost 2 weeks in office. Let me introduce the panelists here in studio. Senator Godfrey Osotsi is the Senator of Vihiga County. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Sam, and good morning, Kenyans, wherever you are.
Great. Gladys Boss is the Deputy Speaker, woman representative for Uasin Gishu. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back. You've been lost.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And Senator Richard Onyonka, Senator of Kisii County. Good morning.
Good morning, Sammy. Good morning, Kenyans. How are you, sir?
I'm all right.
Good.
Good to see you. And let's quickly take a look at the stories making headlines on the two dailies. Starting with the Standard, the teachers demand 42% salary raise. They are saying they cannot pay the housing levy without first getting an increment as their salaries are too low and the cost of living has pushed many to the edge. They want the 2021-2025 CBA reopened. And of course, you see the quotations of the Secretary General of KUPPET, of NAT, and the Deputy National Treasurer of KUPPET, them making a case why they want a pay rise before the deductions of 3% for the housing levy can take effect. Of course, this is still at the stage of lawmaking. It is a bill, Finance Bill 2023. The public were invited to present their memoranda by close of business on Saturday, that is the 20th of May, and thereafter there's supposed to be public hearings which should be beginning, I believe, today or this week for people to give their views. The finance bill is what will be passed shortly after the budget of 2023-2024 that gives an indication of how the government plans to collect the revenue to finance that particular expenditure plan that will be presented on the 15th of June by the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, before the House, that is the National Assembly. Then the do-or-die moment for Uhuru's Jubilee is also a story that is on the Standard. Come to the Daily Nation. Governors fight Ruto's plan to take over health. A meeting between the President and Health Workers Union on February 14 to plan the takeover of health functions from counties has angered governors. The State House meeting proposed the formation of a Health Risk Commission, an independent body that will oversee the management of all medics. The county bosses see this as encroachment of a devolved function and have warned the national government to stop meddling in the affairs of the counties. Then again, inside Uhuru, 620 billion shilling tax waivers to multinational firms, including the currency printer De La Rue and KBL, that is the Kenya Breweries Limited, Moja Expressway, among other companies that benefited from tax waivers granted by former president's administration. And we saw the acting Commissioner General in Parliament indicating that the government is letting down the Kenya Revenue Authority. They collect revenue, but they go ahead and quote-unquote waste it. So much more to talk about. But first, I want us to begin by looking at what has been happening about the purge at the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency. Is it last week that we saw the sacking of Principal Secretary Dr. Josephine Mburu? We also saw the sacking of the board of KEMSA that had been in office between February and this month. We also saw the suspension of this Chief Executive Officer, Terry Ramadhani. But also something has been affecting the country, and that is the contaminated sugar, that we are seeing the story of one of the suspected masterminds, Crispus Waithaka, now arrested. He is alleged to be behind the 163 million condemned sugar scandal. He was arrested at the JKIA, and of course, he arrived from Dubai. Investigations continue. Some 5 people now have so far been arrested, but the sugar is yet to be found, apart from a few bags that are found in Eastleigh, suspected to be from that consignment that had been condemned some 5 years ago. And that's where I want us to begin with you, Senator Osotsi, on because we're seeing some arrests made. There's word that there could be some senior government officials that are involved. How does this happen, and what actions do you think needs to be taken at such a time that Kenyans are grappling with the cost of sugar? Then again, you're not certain of the sugar that you'll find in the shelves, whether it's good sugar or what has been termed to be toxic.
Well, Sam, first of all, I think this is an act of genocide. Because if you can release sugar that is contaminated, that is poison to the public, just because of money, I think that amounts to genocide, and the culprit behind it must be apprehended and punished properly. But looking through the story, I think something is not adding up. Clearly, there are powerful individuals who are behind this scandal. And I think it is fair for the government to call a spade and tell us who are the key people behind this scandal. Going for small people, sacking them or arresting them will not solve this problem. We want to be told who is that cabinet secretary who is involved, who is that member of parliament who is involved, and who is that senior person within the Kenya Kwanza regime who is involved. I think that's more important. Trying to hide some important facts and trying to interfere with the investigation so that to protect these key people will not help us solve this problem. So I think it's important that Kenyans be told the truth. We have heard some things, right, I have not confirmed, but we have heard some things that a very, very senior person within Kenya Kwanza regime, he's actually the one who ordered the release of that sugar to the public. Right. And really, you know, I started by saying this is genocide. Okay. Really, a leader, if that is true, then it's very unfortunate, because a leader of that level, who understands that this sugar is contaminated, this sugar is poisonous, going ahead to order the release of that sugar to go to the public, I think is very unfortunate. There are better ways of making money if you have to make money. You don't have to release poison to the people. Okay. And I think this is not just corruption. Of course, this is genocide, because you can imagine the people who will consume that sugar. And this morning I was listening to your news, and you were saying that actually that sugar was being distributed in slum areas, Kawangware, where people are very vulnerable, where people can easily buy that sugar. I think that is so sad and very unfortunate that corruption in this country is taking us to that level. Okay. Of course, so much is still unknown about how this happened, because the reports that we have even from the authorities is just about how the sugar was transported from Mombasa all the way to Thika, and on a day that the officials are supposed to go there to witness the release for it to be dissolved to become ethanol, then they found that it wasn't there. Let's listen to what the president said about corruption before I can get to the other panelists here in studio.
I will take personal responsibility on the accountability of resources of the people of Kenya. Pesa wananchi wa Kenya wametoa kwa jasho yao. Hakuna mtu ataiba. Hawawezi. Na mtu akijaribu atakutana na mimi, kwa sababu sina kazi nyingine. Ile kazi nilipatiwa na ile fimbo nilipatiwa pale ni kunyorosha watu ambao wanataka kukuwa na pesa ya wananchi.
All right. Of course, he's promising that to deal with the corrupt officials. Deputy Speaker, how is it possible that such a thing can happen, that you would have expected that it is well guarded? You wouldn't expect that sugar that has been kept in such a place it just disappears, and it's a whole 1 million kilograms.
And I think, yes, I think it's something that Kenyans need now to relook at, and I'm glad that I think the head of public service has suspended members, people from KEBS, KRA, DCI, because it takes the entire chain of various institutions who are involved in this for that to be able to happen. It can't be one institution only. Because it's a long time since the sugar was actually approved to be released for use to be converted to ethanol. Right. That was in 2019. And so it's good that now we have a president where we have the good political goodwill to fight corruption, so that there is thorough investigations. Because previously what has happened is every time there'd be a scandal, then after a while it's hushed down, it's quiet, and nothing happens. We would be told, oh, in 21 days, people are going to face the music for KEMSA. The 21 days passed and nothing happened. But as the president has said, he'll take political responsibility.
Right.
And so that's a good place to start. Yes. Okay. Because there are not going to be any sacred cows. That is what has been said.
Sacred cows. I have heard that before. They are not going to be there. But anyway, it's just 8 months. We'll wait.
It's a new administration.
Yeah.
I think they have clearly, I think several statements have been made by the Kenya Kwanza government that they are going to deal with corruption head on. You will see that the Kenya Kwanza has gone to strengthening the judiciary. Why? If you strengthen the judiciary, make them more independent, then the judiciary can help you in the war against corruption. Because it doesn't just take, it's not about government statements, it's about making sure that the institutions that are supposed to fight corruption are functioning. From ESCC to DCI to Kenya Revenue Authority, to the Agriculture and Food Authority, all those people are involved.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And of course, the list of 27 officials that were suspended, including the managing director at the KEBS, that is one Bernard Njiraine. Senator Onyonka, what are your thoughts about this, and how do we get to, because he has made quite a bit of claims there, but how do we get to the bottom of this to unearth the truth?
First of all, I want to actually, from deep down my heart, to congratulate William Ruto for saying what he said the other day about this corruption.
Right.
But I really hope he means it. You see, my sister has already said, you know, previous regimes, what they used to do is this. I really hope the president is serious, and I hope he's not going to take prisoners, because what great leadership is a leader who can stand up even when it is least expected for him to stand up for the people who voted for him.
Right.
Number two, I want to mention to my sister, Shleya, not for any reason whatsoever, but it's because you are the last person who mentioned this point and it stuck in my mind. You are saying, yes, Kenya Kwanza has brought in judges, and Kenya Kwanza is actually doing, because it's now becoming a government of rule of law. But Kenya Kwanza is refusing to honor court orders. So even if you bring these judges and bring 500 judges,
which court
and
order?
Put the one of the CAS, if you want to be seen as a regime that is going to be law-abiding, that is going to fight corruption, that is going to be believed by Kenyans, because the previous regimes were never believed by Kenyans. It was the story of the usual nonsense. The truth is, then the president should continue, have these people arrested, give them their due process, but don't stop at the point where you only end up and say it is Njiraine who removed that sugar. If it is known that people high above, I believe the president should do something about it, just even to set an example. I remember Uhuru did it once. Even during that time, of course, there were contradictions about the people who are being accused for having participated in crime, and therefore, you remember that rating which was given about the leaders and everything. Me, I believe President William Ruto can do a better job. Why? Because guys respect him, others fear him. People know that if William Ruto stands up and says, the thing he said there, I'm telling you, Sam, if the thing William has said there, saying that from now on, you saw the sword I was given, yes. Now, if he does 2-3 examples like that, corruption will come down to 3%.
But correction on one point,
yes.
The CISs are not yet in office. They are waiting for the judgment.
Some of them are already there. They are acting. They're already running around.
We've seen them at functions.
So they're running around.
Reading statements.
It is wrong for people not to give. I mean,
okay, I don't know.
We are destroying our legal system. It is maybe our own last line of defense. And yet, what is happening? People who are supposed to be honorable, people who are legislators, we are the ones passing laws here. You get a court order. Governors are doing the same thing. A governor is served with a court order. Nothing. He says there's nothing a judge can do. So let us have an example from the top. If somebody goes to court and the government is given a court order, please honor it. Okay. After all, that was the argument that the president made mpaka he was elected as president. He used to say, watu wanachukua sheria, they have turned it against us, they are victimizing, they have weaponized it. Now what we are saying, if a court order comes from court, let the KK government honor it. Okay. So that Onyonka can honor it, so that a governor in Mandera can honor it, so that Kenyans believe and start working as a people who believe in the rule of law.
All right, I want to introduce the Member of Parliament for Kamukunji, Yusuf Hassan. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Good morning.
And it's good to see you. We are talking about the recent actions at KEMSA and, of course, what is happening with the contaminated sugar issue. And yes, the president is promising to take action. Actually, let's listen to what the Prime Cabinet Secretary said after the action on KEMSA.
Kuna wengine hawajali maisha ya Wakenya, wanapitisha kwa njia isiyofaa sukari ambayo haitakikani, tena amefyatua risasi. Yeye anataka Wakenya wahudumiwe kwa njia ya haki, na hapo ndio sisi tunataka tulenge kama Wakenya.
All right, so how do you ensure, Mheshimiwa, that because already a principal secretary has been sacked, that is in relation to the KEMSA issue, there are allegations that senior government officials, including a cabinet secretary, might also be involved in the sugar issue. So how do you ensure that, yes, the president is cracking the whip, but also following the due process, due administrative process, to ensure that you're not sacking people just because there's an allegation, but it's proper due diligence?
Yes, I think, but one needs to acknowledge the president's effort and his determination to deal with this thing. But if you look deeper, we're now dealing with the symptoms rather than the underlying causes of this particular problem. And if you look at over the years, we've had institutional failure driven by corrupt and unethical public officials. One has not asked, how did these officials end up in these public positions? Because many of them are not selected on meritocracy. They are selected because of nepotism and favoritism. Many of these public organizations are run people who are really not the right people to run them. So although the president might be dealing with the symptoms, unless we're able to put into place public officials who operate independently, transparently, and accountable to the Kenyan public, we would continue to have these mediocre officials who, once they get into office, do not see themselves as public servants working for the Kenyan people, but see themselves simply there to enrich themselves, to introduce corrupt practices, to employ people from their own ethnic groups. And this is the rot that the president needs to deal with by, first of all, making sure that from now onwards, we employ people who can do that job because of their own competence and ethical position. Unless we are able to do that, we'll be doing this firefighting every other few months. But there are many institutions, when you look at the people who are there, you would wonder how they even function because they don't deserve to be in those positions. They're not competent. They're not ethical. We need to change that because we cannot develop as a country if we do not have strong institutions based on the rule of law and led by people who are public servants there to serve the Kenyan public. And I think whatever else we do is purely just touching the surface and not going deep into this particular problem.
And when you said that some of these officials are not there independently, they're not independent as they should, what do you mean? Because most of them are appointees of the president.
Yes, the president can appoint from a huge pool of highly qualified Kenyans. Does it mean that there are only few people who can be selected for those positions? Don't we have the right and qualified people who can do these things? Many private institutions are run very efficiently, and we're one of the most competitive countries in the region. Our top managers are working in the neighboring countries and beyond. So the question is, if you have a strong, principled, and competent leader, they would resist interference. They would resist political interferences. But now, many of these people seem to be agents of bigger political figures. They are puppets who are controlled from another office, which is a very clear indication that, first of all, they were not there to serve the public. They were to serve their personal interest, limited group interest. And
the president is not able to read this through this at the point of appointments?
Well, I have seen some very qualified, very competent people being appointed. But even the other day, when you look at some of the two last big chairpersons who've been appointed to some of these political, public parastatal organizations, there are people who've been rejected by the public. There are people with kind of not a very good reputation.
What are you talking about?
Well,
several.
If you read the last appointments, you see that.
You said two.
Yeah, at least two people.
What are you talking about?
One was a cabinet secretary, a former cabinet secretary who was thrown out for incompetence.
Rashida Chesa?
Yes, and the other one is another famous failed politician from Nairobi. So you don't expect characters like that
to manage
with,
the system.
With backgrounds, terrible backgrounds.
Look at Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. I mean, the people who the president appointed to the board know nothing about civil aviation. None of them. In other words, if somebody went to IATA and they are going to discuss matters pertaining to the city, I mean, you see what we are saying, Sami, the president can actually hire people who worked with him. That is within the constitution. But can't he hire clever people? Can't he hire quality material? Can't he hire people who are like exactly like my sister here, Gladys Sholei? Mtu anasimama anasema ni mbaya ni mbaya. We can't do that. Why is it that we are rewarding mediocrity in our country?
Okay, Honorable Boss, I'll give you the opportunity to respond. I'm sure you won't lack an answer, but when a president is looking at all these positions, and like he raises a question about Rashida Chesa, if you look at his education background, I mean, I don't think it goes beyond primary school, but now he's the chairperson of the Kenya Water Towers Agency. What is this that he has to balance when he's picking people to such offices?
No, I think the issue is you appoint people. Some of these positions, you have technical officers who actually are highly qualified. That's what happens. So sometimes we can give the example of a cabinet secretary doesn't have to be like an expert who should have studied that particular that field of docket. But the point is, are they a visionary leader? If they are, then they will rely on the technical staff who already exist and have been in the ministry for years, who are hired for their technical capabilities. And that is what you look at. And if that person is not able to provide that visionary leadership that is required, then they can be fired from the job. So what I always say is the problem is keeping someone if they're incompetent. Hiring them, hire them. Let's see if they're capable of doing it. Because even when we are in parliament, we pass legislation, we oversight the executive. But the qualification of a member of parliament is to not just have post-secondary education. But it doesn't mean that those members of parliament are not capable of undertaking their duties. When we sit in parliament, even without any education, you can sit in the health committee. But we have clerks who are technical officers who provide the technical support to those members of parliament. So if we were
But at the time you're championing education for all and even revising the model funding at the university level, what sense does it make to hire someone without even basic education to completion to lead an agency at the position of chairperson? You're guiding policy.
I was giving the example. I was giving the example of Parliament, and that's why I said that person is not the CEO.
Correct.
They are. Remember, the board deals with the policy, and they're not involved in day-to-day operations. So it is if that person fails to take the advice of the technical support team who are professionals and experts in that field, then there will be a problem. That person, like when I say they provide visionary leadership, is they understand the society. They understand the needs of the various regions in Kenya and what services Kenyans need around the water authority.
Okay, all right. So for you, Honorable Osotsi, as you exit from this conversation then, do you see any problem in those appointments? I know there's the idea to be as inclusive as possible, but when you have someone who had been removed from office in a previous administration, not removed, but fired or sacked.
But there was no conviction on him.
Yes.
You see, I have also been fired before, but in fact, I personally was fired by the JSC allegedly for incompetence. Do I look incompetent? Incompetence has no place on my chair. But I was fired for incompetence. So the thing is, you ask yourself, was there a final finding on that person for incompetence? And again, I'll always go back to using the analogy of members of parliament. If you're saying that people should take a position because of they must have absolute expertise in the area, then it means parliament should only have lawyers because they make legislation. Then you should be saying that Parliament, because we deal with the oversight of the executive, should be professional technocrats who have worked in the public service. That's what you're saying?
No, that's not.
Senator Osotsi, so does it, how do you justify it? Someone has been sacked in a previous administration now, because this has happened over and over again. How do you make a case for that?
Maybe let me say something about that speech by President Ruto. You know, when he was saying that, he looked very serious. But, you know, the irony of it was that some of the people who are allegedly involved in this sugar scandal and even KEMSA were seated behind him.
But let's wait and see.
So what a contradiction. And then number two, if you look at the appointments they are making, clearly that is the beginning of corruption. Because these people are not being appointed there to go and work and deliver. They are being appointed there to go and earn. And you know, we know what happens in a board. Board members are not paid much. Actually, according to guidelines, they are supposed to have only one sitting per quarter. So in a year, they will do 4 sittings, and maybe one sitting, they'll earn about maybe 80,000. So that is about 320,000. But they still make more money because they twist the technical people that Madam Shole is referring to.
How do they do that?
Through tendering.
Then there's something wrong with that technical officer if they can be employed.
Through tendering and such even employment. So that is where corruption starts. So I think for him to be serious with the fight against corruption, I think it starts with the quality, the ability, the competence, and the character of the people who are appointed. The other day I saw in social media that one of the people who are appointed to be, is it permanent secretaries, principal secretaries, was involved in Waititu corruption case. Now she is there as a PS. What does that tell you about the nature of
They've been
appointments?
convicted?
No, I mean, it was there. You remember the Waititu matter, the corruption case, when he was a governor of Kiambu. One of the ladies involved there was actually one of the people who were appointed to be principal secretaries.
That's what I'm asking. I mean, where do you draw the line? Because you can have an active matter, so you may be convicted, you may not be. What should happen? in your view?
I mean, once the matter is dispensed with, then that person should cease being a principal secretary. I know the matter is still in court. That's why we don't go into details about it, because of sub judice. But you see, the very act of one having such a serious allegation hanging on her or him is enough for the president not to appoint that person into a critical position of a principal secretary.
Honorable Hassan,
and that is also puts to question the role of Public Service Commission. You have even seen, I saw Transparency International now questioning the Public Service Commission in terms of the process of them processing people for these jobs, and questioning why ethics and corruption is not an issue.
Okay.
Because the president will, of course, say, I received the name from Public Service Commission. But what is the role of Public Service Commission in processing these names to ensure that these people are people of integrity, they are people who are going to manage those positions with the necessary competence that is required for those positions?
I hear you. Honorable Hassan, I want us to exit from this conversation with a question of we've heard that some of the cases that different leaders were facing, or certain officials were facing, were politically instigated in the previous regime. So even as we talk about this, there's that perception that they are being punished by the previous regime. So really, you can't win this war.
No, of course, there are cases where, which have been politicized, and where individuals have been victimized because of the position or the role they have played in our politics. And I think that's completely wrong. And that's why we have to have very strong institutions that can sift through this in a very fair and just manner, and make sure that those individuals are not victimized permanently. So I'm not saying that the president or the leadership of the country should not select people who may have gone through some controversy. Right. And a good example is our sisters, is a very good example. But there are very obvious cases. Even you don't need to be a thinking person to know that there's something wrong with the appointment of some particular persons. And you know, as a leader, you would need to think and say, why would I have that particular person in this particular position? For example, the argument is that it doesn't matter, these are political appointees. They can be selected, but there is a technical team that will be running these institutions. But say you have a chairman like the gentleman that we have mentioned, who doesn't have any qualification for the position, and he is supervising a professor or a highly technical person.
Or he goes to make a presentation at the UN.
What would be the morale of that organization? What do you think it is when you know that this is a technical institution like KEMSA, for example, or KIMRI, or any of those organizations, and they're run by a mediocre, someone who's been picked from the streets, who has absolutely no qualification? I understand people who have supported that particular political party or that leader needs to be looked at and given attention. But there are less damaging positions and roles that they can be appointed to, not into these critical positions that they have been given. So I think it is important to emphasize that we need to build strong institutions. When you build strong institutions, you also guarantee that, in fact, the individuals who are there are not likely to be manipulated or involved in corrupt and ethical position. And those institutions, once they run very well, independently, accountable, and transparently, can then be measured to deliver. But if you are going to manipulate these institutions politically, and this is just not about this particular government, this is a problem that has existed before. So while I compliment the president for the actions that he has taken place, and I want to encourage him to continue on that path, but also we need to review how we select people for positions, how we run these institutions, and to make sure that we respect the independent status of some of these institutions so that they can deliver for the Kenyan people. Because one of the reasons of underdevelopment and poverty is because a lot of resources are siphoned through these institutions and by individuals like this, that we're not able to achieve some of our development objectives. And since the president is very serious about moving this country forward, then surely he should have a zero tolerance to corruption and incompetence.
Okay, all right. And of course, in no way are we suggesting that the gentleman that has been appointed to that chairmanship of the Kenya Water Towers Agency is corrupt. That is not what we're suggesting here. And that is not the position of Citizen TV. I want us to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking about financing the plan of President William Ruto, but also looking at his plans against the law. He made a statement yesterday that he wants valuation of land that is meant for public projects that has to be compensated, that valuation can be done by the Ministry of Lands, should no longer be done by the National Land Commission, because he feels there's been a lot of misuse of that power. But what does that do to the existing law and, of course, the reforms that have been achieved in the land sector? After the break, stay tuned.